there are times when renewable energy or specific upgrades are not the best for a particular location, a particular family. People having a bad experience, it doesn't help us.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
First up, Energy Alabama is a nonprofit membership-based organization that has advocated for clean energy in Alabama since 2014. Their work is based on 3 pillars: education, advocacy, and technical assistance. Since their creation, they have helped businesses, schools, nonprofits, homeowners, and even renters decrease their energy usage. They've taught more than 12,000 Alabama students about sustainable energy. They have facilitated the construction of over 900 kilowatts of solar. They helped Alabama power consumers get $100 million back. And they're a proud sponsor of the Valley Labor Report. We're happy to have them. Daniel Tait is the executive director of Energy Alabama and our next guest. Daniel, thanks for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Daniel, one of the things that y'all are really proud of is your education of students and adults about the opportunities that do exist for renewable energy. Can you talk to us about, that work?
For sure. Our work is, primarily education, I would say. Out of the 3 things that you mentioned, education is probably the most important. And that's just getting out there and talking to regular folks at events around different communities, getting in and talking with students and helping folks understand about the career options and, how to get further education. As you mentioned earlier, probably the most important thing, right, that a lot of people think about when they think about energy is paying a utility bill. And I don't know about anybody else, but I try to make sure and want to make sure that number is as low as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So, helping folks understand the things that they can do and also some of the policies that they can advocate for that help to reduce costs of energy, make it cleaner, and be good for our economy. So all those types of things are what we're doing, in schools and out in events in the community.
Yeah. So, the educating folks about the options that they do have. Why do you feel why was that the thing that you wanted to pursue? As there's all sorts of stuff that that you could do. And that does need to be done as far as the energy sector is concerned. Why is education the thing that you wanted to kind of single out and go after?
Yeah, for us, it was really, when we founded the organization back in 2014, those 2 first buckets were the biggest ones, education and advocacy. And what we meant by that is, we knew we had to teach people about what renewable energy was, what energy efficiency was, what the options were, what it could do, and what it can't do, right? So I think there's a lot of information out there, sometimes intentional, sometimes not, right? Just, the questions, for instance, that we get from people today are very different than the questions we got from people back in 2014. Then it was, does this stuff even work? Is it real? Is it magic fairy dust? Today, we get questions more like, how the heck do I actually do this? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? How do I find a contractor? So we really felt like we had to be a resource to help people understand how to go from point A to point B, how to actually make improvements on their homes, how to actually make improvements at the local school district, local school buildings and things like that. So a lot of the work that we've done has actually been with other nonprofits, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're giving money to a nonprofit organization or you're a taxpayer, you want that money to go to educating kids. You want that money to go to service of whatever that nonprofit's mission is, maybe helping the homeless or feeding the hungry. You don't want that money to go to paying utility bills and overhead, right? So that's right. What we try to help people understand how to make that happen.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, so give us one of those, those education seminars that you give to people when you're talking to people about the options that they have. What is some of the information that you go over? Give us, you've got these day-long seminars. Give it to us in 3 minutes.
All right. Give me the hard question there, right? All good. We can do it. So I think the biggest thing is there's probably 2 or 3 buckets that people can really focus in on. One is there's a difference in terms of if you're a homeowner, what you can do versus if you're a renter, right? And so a lot of times, if you're a renter, you may not have a lot of control over the property, over the things that you can do. And so we try to, give folks a list of things that they can do that are inside their control. And by the way, I'm happy to share that. We make that, publicly available. So anybody who has questions about that kind of thing, we're happy to make those resources available. And then if you're a homeowner, we help connect for energy audits and energy efficiency experts to come in and tell you where, your specific home can reduce. Oftentimes, at least from what we see in North Alabama, a lot of times that's air sealing, insulation, and duct sealing. A stat that still absolutely blows my mind even to this day is that most of the times that I've seen duct tests, so they come in and they blow pressurized air through your ducts, right, to see how much air is actually leaking into your attic or your crawl space. And, I grew up and my parents would say, close the door, you're born in the barn. But we often find that is exactly what's happening, right? And in fact, most of the houses that are tested, 30-40% of the air that you're paying to condition to make cool or hot is just dissipating out into the attic or the crawl space. So it's just wild, being able to spend a few $100 to tampen that down, it'll save you a lot of money, but most importantly, make you more comfortable. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this can be about money, but a lot of it too is like, do you want to be comfortable in your own home? You want your HVAC to do what it was designed to do? So things like that, we step people through, like how to do it. And that a lot of this stuff is not that expensive. I mean, you do have to make some investment, but we're talking about in the scale of hundreds, if not low thousands of dollars to, save a good bit of money every month and make you more comfortable. And renewables are another issue that we deal with a lot, and it's a lot harder in Alabama to make those things happen than you see in many other areas of the country. And that kind of leads into some of our advocacy and policy work, because we have to kind of get some bad policies off the books and some good policies on the books to be able to make those options more cost effective and open and accessible to a lot of people in the state.
Right. And one of the things that impresses me about folks is when they give advice that maybe isn't actually, that is best for the person that they're giving the advice to, but is maybe not best for their organization or whatever. And so I was asking you about solar power for my parents, and they live in and basically you told me that, well, where they live, the woods that are around them, everything, it actually wouldn't really make sense where they're at. And that kind of stuff impresses, the integrity of the advice that your organization gives and the education that they give, that I think kind of speaks volumes, that you're actually going to not give people advice or education that is going to specifically push a quote unquote agenda or like make y'all more money. You are trying to help the folks that you're educating.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we don't sell a product, right? As the nonprofit kind of education group, what we're trying to do is, spread the information and make sure that people are protected. I mean, I'm not going to lie, right? Just like with any other field, whether you're talking about HVAC or roofing or whatever it may be, there are companies or contractors that will take advantage of people, and we don't want to see that happen. And so if someone has a product to sell, I'm not saying that everybody who has a product to sell doesn't have integrity. That's not the case, but that you just have to understand everyone's motivations. And there are times when renewable energy or specific upgrades are not the best for a particular location, a particular family, and people having a bad experience with energy efficiency or putting solar panels on and not getting what they expected, not seeing the savings that they expected. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help trying to move the industry forward. And so that's what we're, part of the education that we're doing is you just got to be open and honest with folks. And a lot of times about what these things can't do and make sure that people don't have unrealistic expectations going in.
Yeah. I mean, the like you said, when somebody's got a product to sell, there is an incentive there, and even if we say that energy or renewables, these are maybe, we'll say, good industries, they're still run by owners and bosses and stuff, and capitalists, and so there's John Oliver had a really good segment about the predatory nature of some of these solar power contractors, and so actually knowing what is going to help you. What is going to help your company or your nonprofit or you as an individual, you as a family, as a consumer. That's something that's important, and I think that your organization does have a lot of integrity in that kind of in that vein. And so beyond education, you do actually education is kind of your primary thing, but you do play a role in the facilitation of renewables. One of the things on your website is that you have facilitated the construction of more than 900 kilowatts of solar. What does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so this is kind of where education and that facilitation or technical assistance come together. And I want to flag for folks, anyone who's listening, or whether now or later, that this is a resource that we provide, and we are happy to look at. Like if someone is going solar and they have quotes and they're looking at technical documents and saying, what the heck does this mean? Is this a good deal? Is it not a good deal? Like, this is where it comes into, we can help and look at that and say, well, based on what you tell us and what we see here in front of us, this is a good deal. This is not a good deal. Or you should ask the contractor these types of questions to make sure that you get the protections that you need. And so for facilitation for us has primarily been that kind of advisory role, primarily for other nonprofit organizations and or small businesses. And so oftentimes, people, they hear things and they say, hey, renewable energy sounds good to me. Want to try to do it. I want to try to figure it out. I don't know where to start. And that's really where we've been trying to help folks to say, okay, what's the opportunity, kind of like how you reached out about your parents, and in cases where it is potentially a good fit, we work with those businesses or the local government or the school district, depending on, who reaches out for help. And we go to contractors and say, this is what we're looking at. This is what this particular customer is looking at building. Give us your best price. Tell us what you want to do. And then we kind of go over that with someone to say, you have three options on the table. This one doesn't look so hot. Wouldn't do it if I were you. And these two look pretty competitive. And your decision should be based kind of on these couple of variables. Do you want a panel that's made in America? Do you want panels that have a 25-year warranty instead of a 20-year warranty? Things like that is what we're going to try to pull out for folks to say what's important to you and help you make that decision. And that's really what we've been doing.
Yeah, and the machinists in Decatur are actually looking at buying a union hall here in the next year or so. So that's a service that would be available to unions and locals that have halls in Huntsville and across the state as well. You want to, because when we pay dues for our local, or when we pay our utility bills for our local union halls, that's coming out of our dues. And so, we want to, if we can spend less on the utility bills at our union halls, we can put more of that money into organizing or membership services, stuff like that. So
I think that's a fantastic idea, Jacob. And I would encourage anyone listening, if you're not sure if your local has done anything recently with your local union hall, reach out to Daniel in Energy Alabama and see if maybe y'all can get an energy audit or just get some feedback on how you can reduce the utility bills of your local hall and just be more sustainable with the physical property that you have.
Right. So beyond the advocacy and the education, y'all actually fight on behalf of consumers as well. One of the things that you mentioned on your website and you say in your ads that run on our program is that y'all helped to secure $100 million refund from Alabama Power. Can you talk to us about that and your organization's involvement in that case?
For sure. A lot of people think about sustainability and they think about it in an environmental sense. They think about, how am I going to save the trees and the polar bears? And don't get me wrong, those things are great. But at the heart for us in sustainability is about people. If it doesn't make economic sense, if it doesn't make sense environmentally, but also if it doesn't make sense for people, it's not a strategy. It's not something that is going to hold long term. And so for us, advocating on behalf of consumers is a no-brainer. This particular thing was not necessarily about renewable energy or energy efficiency. It was just the right thing to do. In theory, in Alabama, the Attorney General's office is supposed to be the designated consumer advocate at the Public Service Commission, a regulatory agency that most people don't know that directly affects the utility bill of the vast majority of Alabamians, especially in the kind of Birmingham and South area of the state. And so essentially what happened in this particular case is that right after COVID, struck in, March of 2020, y'all will remember that, gas prices at that time, if we can even fathom it right now, were extremely low. And essentially the power company was over collecting in terms of how much money it needed to pay for gas, natural gas that it was using to generate power. And so there's this fund that we, most consumers that are Alabama, if you're an Alabama Power customer, pay into to pay for the gas. And that fund was, in excess of $100 million over collected. So it was a lot of money just sitting there essentially that had no bills to pay. And we couldn't think of a better time to ask for a refund of that money, in the sense that, you're talking about the middle of 2020, a lot of people out of work, still not knowing what's going to happen, because, the whole world was much more uncertain than it is today, and it's still pretty uncertain today. But so we petitioned, essentially, we sent a letter to the Public Service Commission saying, y'all have the authority to order Alabama Power to refund all this money to customers. So it's customer money. It's something that we as customers paid into. They don't need it anymore. Give it back. And they did, largely gave most of it back. I think it was about $100 million out of about 120 that had been over collected. And so most Alabama Power customers got a credit to their bill for the proportion of the money that they had put into that fund. So we felt like that was really important. And, the other thing is, I'll add that the fuel cost that Alabama Power collects is largely based on the price of gas. So while we are doing this, trying to get money back for consumers that they have overpaid, we are simultaneously advocating for using less gas. Alabama Power has, over the last 5 to 10 years, been over-reliant. And a lot of people think that most of their power comes from hydroelectric dams and nuclear, but it's mostly gas. And you can see today, when we have been saying for years that gas prices will not be low forever, they will come back. Things will happen. They are volatile. And I hate being proven right in a case like this, where, we got money back, but at the same time, we wanted to reduce the reliance on gas so that if prices came back up high, that customers wouldn't be hurt. So we got the refund, but the other parts were ignored, right? Nice. So gas prices came roaring back, and, here we are with customers being hurt again, when we really should be reducing that reliance.
Right. Yeah. Well, so how do you feel like that work, I think that you kind of explained it there, but if you want to elaborate a little bit further, how do you feel like that sort of consumer support plays into your to your broader mission of decarbonization and utilization of renewable energy?
Yeah, it just goes back to it's got to be good for people, right? And a lot of times people think about it in an environmental way, but we do, but it's mostly about people. And if we want to decarbonize the economy, we want to decarbonize Alabama, at the heart of it, if we're not advocating for policies that help the average Alabamian, every family here that has to pay a utility bill and wonders about where that energy is coming from and how it impacts the environment around their home and their family, then we're missing the boat. And that's really where it's at, is if we can be and keep at the heart of all of our work impact to help regular folks, then we know we'll get there. There is no world in which we're going to be successful in pushing policy or pushing changes that hurts people. And we definitely don't want to do that. So that's where this comes from, is that we would rather go slower and help people along the way to make sure everybody can get there than go faster and leave people stranded, leave people hurt along the way.
Right, right. David had a question in the chat. Do you know anything about the solar panel manufacturer in Huntsville that went out of business?
Yeah, that was LG. So most people will know LG is a pretty large manufacturer of consumer electronics and things like that. They did have a solar panel manufacturing facility in Huntsville. LG makes some of the more highly efficient modules. And so LG, is my understanding, and I could be a little wrong here, but LG was essentially exiting like solar manufacturing, period, like as a company globally. So I don't think, while it's pretty unfortunate, and I definitely did not want to see that happen. There were quite a few people here in the Huntsville area that were employed by that plant. I do believe they're going to be keeping their jobs and moving to a different area of the company. So that is good. We don't have folks unemployed, I hope. But nonetheless, that did happen, and part of that, I think, was that, at least from my understanding, a decision from LG, like at the very top, to just get out of this business. I'm not going to lie. Manufacturing solar panels is a tough business, and it is a very thin margin business because there's so much competition, especially from China and Vietnam and other places overseas, especially some that are, as y'all probably are aware, the Biden administration has taken some action on Chinese solar panels for use of essentially underwaged and slave labor and practices like that in China. So with things like that have made it pretty hard for American manufacturers to compete. And so that's a big part of it too.
Your organization recently sent out an email about the TVA. Can you explain what y'all are doing? The TVA is doing something else. Can you just explain what the TVA is doing and why y'all are kind of opposed to it?
Yeah, so the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority is the nation's largest public power utility, and it was born out of the New Deal, right? So it came from the 1930s, to bring electricity to the valley, and this is a huge part of what it did. Is not just about electricity; it's about a lot of other things that TVA provided to make this area usable and for farming, and it's got some history in World War II and all types of things. But the point being there is that TVA is essentially a federal utility, and as a federal utility, and with that unique history that it has, in our estimation, and many other advocates around the valley, been making a series of missteps that are, harming the agency, making things dirtier and more expensive to provide power in the valley. And, we want to see TVA be on the forefront like it was in the 1930s, like it was even decades ago when it was probably the most progressive utility in the country, providing energy efficiency services to regular folks. It was doing demand response and shutting off things remotely, like back in the 1970s, decades before everybody was doing this thing. So TVA, has it in its DNA to be a progressive utility, to lean into these changes and also make them good for everyone in the valley. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of frustration from advocates like us, with their leaning into technology and leaning into things that are going to raise costs, like new gas plants that we know are not going to run, but for maybe 10 years, but we're going to have to pay for them for 30, 40, 50 years. So we don't want to see TVA do that. We want to see TVA, lean into its progressive roots and the roots that would take care of all the folks in the valley.
Right. So you, as folks that are pushing renewable usage, energy efficiency, stuff like that. A lot of folks see that, and we still get on Twitter every time, or a lot of times when we tweet about the coal miners, we'll get some like, I hate Trump liberal, like talk about like screw these coal miners, basically like, oh, you should just learn to code, just learn to code. And it's good that you're out on strike, and it's good that the company's screwing you over because we don't need coal anyway. And that, they don't understand that it's metallurgical coal, but even if it wasn't metallurgical coal, it's like, well, they shouldn't, to the extent that we're doing this, they should be taken care of. And your organization has been vocal in support of the striking coal miners. How do you see how do you kind of smooth over that perceived conflict for a lot of these folks?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about being good for people. And there is no world in which we can transition to renewable energy and crap on miners and crap on the people who built the economy, who built what we have today. That is, first of all, just the wrong thing to do. And it sure as hell is not a sustainable strategy, right? At the end of the day, we are going to burn coal tomorrow, right? So as long as there is coal being burned and there are people that have to work in this industry, we want those people to be taken care of. And you hear advocates like us who are pushing for, you often hear this word, and sometimes it can be used inappropriately, but we talk about a just transition. And what that means is we all know that technology is going to change. We all know that these things are coming, and we all know that we need to do them pretty quickly. And I mentioned earlier about the speed at which we do things, and the speed does matter. But at the end of the day, we as an organization want to make sure that if we are moving away from coal, and like you mentioned, this is metallurgical coal, so it's a little different, but even if it weren't, right, that the folks in these communities have been thought about. There is a plan in place for which they can continue to provide for their families, in which they can continue to provide not just get a job, but have something comparable, right? A lot of times you hear people, and I see it too, and it's crap. Go learn to code, or go learn to do this, or go whatever. And, if there are people who want to learn to code and that's what they want to do, that's great. They should have those opportunities to do that. But a lot of times I see people advocating for, someone who was earning, $50 to $100 an hour, and then, we'll just go work at the Amazon warehouse for $15 there. It's
right.
These things are not equivalent, right? So we have to be very intentional about how we transition in a way that doesn't take away from those communities. And the good news is that you're seeing, not yet in a state like Alabama, unfortunately, but in some other states, there are closures of coal plants with a plan in place and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into the coal communities who provided the resource in those power plants for education, for job placement, for training, for social support, and not just for 60 days and not just for a year, but for years and years and years, so that school districts can be taken care of, so that there's not a drop off in road maintenance and school support. All those things matter, and they matter over a long period of time. And so that's the kind of thoughtfulness that I think we have to be at when we're talking about a just transition. People matter, flat out. People matter, and we can't forget them.
I think that's a great place to end it. Daniel, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.